Coming to you from the mountains and the plain, the only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And I'm Joe Otto.
And today we are going to be talking about a few things. We want to talk about the wussification of America and how that's really out in force with the reaction to the Chinese coronavirus. We want to talk a bit about Nancy Pelosi and her disgusting comments over the weekend, blaming Trump for people dying. And we want to talk a little bit about Joe Biden, daily Biden gaffes, and how he is now just completely unintelligible when he's on television. They've stripped away all of the production value from his events. It's just him with a camera, and it's really showing. So yeah, it's crazy. How's everything in Denver, Joe?
Well, it's like the zombie apocalypse. There's no one on the road. I mean, if there was a bright spot to all of this, I can get home in 15 minutes from the office.
Yeah, I believe
There's no traffic, but there's no traffic, but I'm kind of missing the traffic. Should I say that out loud? I kind of miss the traffic.
You don't want to say that. One thing that I was looking at is numbers out of Europe. Right now, there are countries that are reporting deaths for people who've passed away from COVID-19. When you actually compare them to the numbers of normal deaths, like deaths that you expect to just happen naturally, they're not seeing a sharp increase because as people are passing away from the coronavirus, obviously it's still early in the pandemic cycle. But what they're finding is that there are fewer people getting in car accidents. There are fewer people dying out and about just doing whatever it is they do outside. So as fewer people are dying outside, it's weird when you look at the data like that, right? Because there are 36,000 people who die in car crashes in the United States every year, somewhere between 34 and 38, depending on the year. As you mentioned, there's practically no one on the roads. So those numbers have to have plummeted. So it's going to be interesting to see when all of this is said and done, when all this is over, whether, yes, people passing away from this disease, it's horrible, but I'd be interested to see whether we even see a net positive, because you think about people like in Chicago, Joe, with gun violence, people being shot by gang violence, right? Those stories, you're not seeing those stories in the news because people are locked down. So it's going to be interesting seeing.
It's still happening. The murders in Chicago are still happening.
It's still happening.
People in gangs don't care about lockdowns, right?
Yeah, it's still happening. But when you have stores are closed, right, you're not having armed robberies, people dying during armed robberies because all the stores are closed, right? It'll be interesting when all is said and done to see whether that makes a difference. Because obviously, if there are less people out and about, then there's less people getting into accidents and dying. So it'll be interesting. Right now in Europe, it looks like there hasn't been a net increase yet. So I mean, hopefully we don't see too many people die from this disease in the United States. And we'll just have to wait and see.
We are seeing a huge spike in suicides.
Oh yeah, cabin fever. I'm starting to feel like I have cabin fever.
No, I'm talking about suicides just based on despair. They say it's up 1,500%, right?
Oh, I believe it.
So people are, and I said this before, more people are going to die of hunger and despair than they ever will of this virus.
Yeah, and that's where you have to really weigh this. That's where you really have to weigh whether the cure is worth it. And Trump said that. He said he was going to look at all the data and reassess whether the cure is more dangerous than the disease itself. And he ended up extending the federal government's recommendation for people not to be out and about for another 30 days. So obviously he made the determination that we still need and the government made that determination. But yeah, it's something we're going to be going up against throughout this entire process of whether it's worth it. And I know your opinion on this, whether it's worth it to shut down the whole economy, whether it's worth it to
the
kill
juice is not.
Yeah.
The juice is not worth the squeeze, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and there's certainly arguments for it. No doubt about it.
Well, this brings me back to what we were talking about last time on the last podcast. We were talking about just the mental state that we have as people, right? And I think one of the things that just resonated for me is that 60 years ago, we go back 60 years, a little bit further if you want to get to the beginning of it, in World War II, we had 18-year-olds that just graduated from high school that were getting off of U-boats in Normandy, were storming the shores of Normandy, knowing that there was a good opportunity that they would be shot and killed, running to protect the freedoms of us as Americans. And you go through time and you talk about what the Vietnam War and the 68,000 people that died in Vietnam, and soldiers that died in Vietnam defending that freedom. And there's been some that say, well, that was a war that we shouldn't have been fighting. And I say that you can justify or reason that no war should have happened. But the reality of it is that as a people, we just had a different tolerance for risk, what it means to live, what it means to protect things that are most precious to you. And now we have states that are locking down the doors on people, home confinement, the equivalent of house arrest, for doing nothing wrong, only because they say that it's good for us with no data. And the no data part is really the thing that I have the biggest problem with, because they really have no data. They don't have any data. They're saying that it's a 1.52% fatality rate, right? And but we don't have the testing kits in the environment to see how many people really had this coronavirus.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories of others saying that it's a super flu, and it knocked them down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and put them in a really bad place. But that could happen if you got the flu. If you got the flu, I mean, the flu can lead to sepsis. The sepsis can lead to other complications like pneumonia. It might be considered a super flu, and maybe 0.25% or so higher than the flu would die as a result of this. But we shut down our entire economy over a what if.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we shut it down over the epidemiologist modeling. It was the London model that said if you do nothing, between 1 and 2 million people will die, and so that freaked everyone out. So then they issued all these lockdowns. Out of 8 billion. Yeah, they issued all these
1 to 2
lockdowns.
million people out of 8 billion people.
They issued all of these lockdowns, and now those same epidemiologists are saying, well, now we have more data, and with these lockdowns, it's looking like in the United States, you're looking at between 100 and 200,000, worst case scenario. So
worst case.
The modeling is, I mean, so part of that is part of the question is, were they wrong to begin with, or are the models changing because we are doing things to interrupt that model, right? When you close every restaurant to in-house dining, that's a big change when you look at these types of models. When you basically shut down the entire economy, no one in, no one out. That's a big difference from what the model suggested, which was worst case scenario if we do absolutely nothing. So we're still going to need to see the data. As you say, the data is very limited. But what I'm absolutely furious about is the governors of places like Michigan and Nevada who banned the use of hydroxychloroquine because Trump touted it as a potential game changer. Now you saw Nevada and Michigan, these governors, and this isn't in their power. The governors don't have the power to tell doctors they're not allowed to prescribe something. That's what you need, a medical license to make those determinations. But so they did that. They banned their doctors in their states from prescribing it to treat COVID-19. And now the Trump administration has come and tried to one-up that and say, no, it's completely FDA approved for all treatments inside of hospitals. It's been ridiculous, Joe. We like to joke that if Trump had figured out a way to cure cancer, Democrats would have a problem with it. And here, this is the closest example to that, where Trump touted a drug based on, albeit limited scientific studies, but still one that showed promise. And we saw Democrats hop on him and actually hope that he was wrong, hope that the drug didn't work. It's Trump derangement syndrome at its finest. And
you see more and more of it. And I want to tout Cuomo for a while, right? For a minute. Cuomo. I always say that wrong. It's almost like saying ambulance. I always want to say ambulance.
How do you pronounce ambulance?
Ambulance. I always have trouble with it. Now that you're making me talk about it, I'm gonna have trouble saying it again. Ambulance.
That sounds normal.
All right. Well, it doesn't when I don't think about it. I have to slow it down. It's like that one word that I can't ever get out. But he said that, hey, this is not a time for politics. The fact that he has to differentiate politics from reality should tell us something about how we're living our life in the political realm.
Yeah. No, I mean that's absolutely correct. Here, let's pivot to this. This was Nancy Pelosi over the weekend, and she was on CNN, and she was asked about what she thought about Donald Trump's handling of this crisis, which, whether you believe the polls or not, the polls show now a majority of Americans support how Donald Trump is handling this. So that is behind a lot of what we're seeing now, where Democrats and the media are going after Trump every chance they get because they're terrified of the polling. Let's go to, I think it's cut one. This is Nancy Pelosi.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you are well and safe. I know your home district of San Francisco has been particularly hard hit. President Trump is considering relaxing federal guidelines for coronavirus for some of the less affected parts of the country. Do you think he should?
Well, first of all, let me just say how sad it is that even since the president's signing of the bill, the number of deaths reported has doubled from 1,000 to 2,000 in our country. This is such a very, very sad time for us. So we should be taking every precaution. What the president, his denial at the beginning was deadly. His delaying of getting equipment to where it continues, his delay in getting equipment to where it's needed is deadly. And now I think the best thing would be to do is to prevent more loss of life rather than open things up so that, because we just don't know. We have to have testing. That's what we said from the start before we can evaluate what the nature of it is in some of these other regions as well. I don't know what the purpose of that is. I don't know what the scientists are saying to him. I don't know what the scientists said to him. When did the president know about this? And what did he know? What did he know and when did he know it? That's for an after-action review. But as the president fiddles, people are dying. And we just have to take every precaution.
No, nothing surprises me from them, though. It just doesn't. You know, she says that since he gave that speech, 1,000 people went from 1,000, doubled, right? Again, using this hyperbole to say it went from 1,000 to 2,000. And you see this in the CNN, what CNN puts out there. I don't know if you saw the article, but CNN came out and said that that one person dies of coronavirus in New York City every 17 minutes. Did you know that a person dies of the flu every 16 seconds in the United States? Every 16 seconds. Every 16 seconds, someone in the United States dies of the flu. Every 16 seconds. So they say in New York, once every 17 minutes, which is probably not true, right? I mean, there's complications and other things that happen. And we don't have any faces to these, or names to these faces that they said died. So we can't even verify any of the information we're getting, because all that information it seems to be collapsed on top of each other, and it's pointing us in a direction of that no one really has any of the real data. They just make it up, right? And we're so I again, we just get stuck in this rat race of fear, right? We want to just push I've seen normal people that I think are of average or higher intelligence that I've had conversations with that are telling me I need to stay inside. And I look at them and I go, what? What did you say? Yeah, I have to stay inside. Everyone needs to stay inside. This could kill us. They actually are talking about it as if it's the boogeyman.
Suffer these issues, and then we might as well also not spread the disease, right? I can't think of anything worse than taking the economic hit to this and also spread the disease by people going out and spreading it. So, I mean, my thinking's evolved. We're not going to change all 50 states, all of their governors from issuing their lockdowns, their regulations. So at this point, we really have to hope that this works, because if this doesn't work and we end up killing the economy and the disease spirals out of control, then it was all for nothing, right? And that is what terrifies me the most. But getting back to Nancy Pelosi, what she said was that Trump was fiddling around and he caused people to die. Joe, do you remember what Nancy Pelosi was doing at the end of January?
No. I think it was the impeachment trial.
Yeah,
right?
it was. It was. So on January 31st, the Trump administration announced that they were shutting off all travel from China into the United States, and that any American who had visited,
I saw this. Yeah.
Any American who had visited an affected area of China had to go through a 2-week mandatory quarantine. What was happening concurrently was Democrats were trying to remove the president from office. So when Nancy Pelosi says that Trump's early inaction and that he dropped the ball and that's why people died, I want to play this clip, because this is what Nancy Pelosi was doing one day before Trump closed the borders to China. Let's go to cut 2.
Well, not getting to that. We are in the Senate. We did our job. We had a strong case for impeachment of the President of the United States. No matter what the senators have the courage or not to do, he will be impeached forever. We believe our argument was strong enough for removal. But we do believe if there's more truth for the American people to know, it is important for them to know. Not that we think we need it to bolster our case, but because we need it to prove to the American people that never should this happen again, that any president of any party, of any gender he or she might be, that it is wrong, it is unconstitutional, that he has undermined our national security, withholding funds from a country that was fighting our adversary, Russia. The president doesn't see Russia as an adversary. As I've said, I don't know what the Russians have on the president politically, personally, or financially, but he doesn't see Russia as an adversary. But on the other hand,
we can cut it there. We get the gist of it. So while Trump was closing the borders, Nancy Pelosi was spreading the conspiracy theory that Russia has something on the president, and that is why he is blocking voter law changes, right? Resisting their investigations. She's out there spreading conspiracy theories while President Trump is taking actions to try and keep the American people safe.
Yeah, I don't, Max, I'm going to say something that I think is, and I always preface it with this is my opinion. But I think the effectiveness of Congress, the teeth of Congress, has been eroded by people being in office for decades. And the amount of corruption and graft that exists today inside of our congressional body is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I believe that President Trump came into office. Let me just spell it out for you. President Trump comes into office. He says, look, I'm going to cut out all the fat. So he stops paying himself. He donates his salary, right? He goes through extraordinary steps to cut out different departments inside of different government agencies that he felt were overlapping their the
cutting out the waste,
their duties, right? Their responsibilities. Yeah. And he systematically cut out, I think the first year was like 300,000 or 400,000 government jobs, and eliminated a large, I think it was like $200 or $300 million in spending. And from that point on, he became the enemy before, but from that point on, he became the enemy of this deep state we talk about. And that deep state is not necessarily someone sitting in a back room trying to figure out how to maneuver the government or the country in one way or another. And that does happen, right? And those conversations happen over 20, 30, 40 years. How do we create a strategy to get to point B? It's kind of the Bernie Sanders effect, right? So Bernie Sanders has been working up to running for president for 40 years, and while never having a job of any significance, while owning multiple homes and being worth millions.
Yeah, the wealth,
working in public service.
The biggest Democratic socialist also happens to be a multimillionaire. Yeah, keep going.
But got that by government work.
Yeah.
Right, by working with the government.
And selling books about his public service. But yeah, he wouldn't be where he was if he wasn't a servant.
Right. So we see this push down happening in government. So the government employees has become this large group of people, right? So you have the ultra wealthy, top 1%, the mega corporations out there that represent roughly, I think 15% of the workforce works for a mega company, right? A company that employs over 5,000 people. And you have the government, which employs a ginormous, even the government or the government sectors, employs a ginormous number of people as well. And so you have these big sectors or interests that get represented pretty well in Congress. And you have congressmen there for 20 to 30 years. They're all becoming millionaires and, giving themselves pay raises and playing the political game of, the left did this wrong, the right did this wrong, you're corrupt. And then you have President Trump that comes along down the middle and says, I really don't care about either one of you. I mean, remember, he pissed off the Republicans the same way he pissed off the Democrats.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no.
He just doesn't care. He comes in, he's like, I'm going to solve the problem. You're going to let me solve the problem. And if you don't let me solve the problem, I'm going to strong my arm way into this, and I'm going to solve the problem anyway. And so he hasn't made friends. He's made the Mitt Romney friends, I'm on the sidelines, and he has people that are the never Trumpers on the Republican side. And then, the Democrats, you have the far loony left, and then you have the fairly middle of the line, socially left people that are Democrats, and they're a little bit more sensible, that are probably the 20 or 30% that actually agree with what Trump's doing. But Trump went into office pissing everybody off.
Yeah.
I mean, the only person he didn't piss off was the American people, the people that just wanted to get an opportunity to get ahead, where they get rid of the regulations, get rid of all the obstacles.
He pissed a lot of them off too, but they were like, he won the election with a low approval rating. People didn't necessarily approve of him, but they thought he was the best man for the job, right?
Because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the amount of graft and corruption that's happening is happening in our congressional body, and that they all are playing CYA. They're all protecting each other, right? And the rules that they operate from are ones of that we're the ruling class. They actually believe that we as citizens, we're their royal subjects.
Yeah.
We have to do what they tell us to do. They know what's best for us. We don't know what's best for us because we're not smart enough to know what's best for us, because they're in Congress. So they're going to pass laws and take things away from us and do things that they think are the greater good for us as people. But none of those laws have ever translated anything that's good for us, only good for them. And so I think that Trump recognized that and said, hey, look, this is not sustainable. We've got to return some of the prioritization of what we do in our country back to the people. And I think that's just pushed Congress on both sides of the aisle. The Republicans are, there's a lot of Republicans that I've had conversations with that are senators and congressmen and women that privately think that, Trump's gone too far. He's changing too many of the rules. The reality of it is all the rules have to change.
Yeah.
And Trump is making those changes. And so it's not surprising to me that he has to wake up every day fighting for his life on both sides. It's not surprising for me that he's dealing with a virus right after he just dealt with impeachment.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it just seems almost convenient that we're dealing from one thing after the other, and even more convenient that the statistics say that, that 2% or 10% or 20 times more deadly than the flu, yet it's not. You say what you want, but there's a lot of recovered people, and I'm just not so sure that. And again, I don't want to be the Alex Jones in the room to say that this is all a conspiracy, but I do know that if this was anything, this was a great test for the government to figure out how far they could go to get rid of constitutional rights, and how far they could go to, create social disconnect, right, or division within our society without ever mentioning a word about politics.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, we're going to take a real quick break, and then we're going to come back. And Joe, I want to get your impression on Joe Biden's quote today. I listened to it 5 times. I can't understand what he's trying to say, but I want to get your opinion on it, and we'll do that right after the break.
Ronald Reagan famously said that our freedoms are never more than a generation away from extinction. Conservative Daily exists to make sure that never happens. With our community of 700,000 members, we fight every day to hold Congress's feet to the fire and stop them from surrendering our rights and freedoms. The fight to take this country back is not over. Please join our movement right now by going to conservative-daily.com and clicking the subscribe button to sign up for our free call to action newsletters. We have a chance to save this country, but only if we all work together. Again, this is conservative-daily.com, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the top.
And we are back from that break. We are talking all things coronavirus and all things with the Democrats' handling of the coronavirus. Joe teased this a little bit before the break. I want to play this clip of Joe Biden because to say it's unintelligible is, I don't know, it's an understatement. I have no idea what he's trying to say, and we can't.
I don't think he knows what he's trying to say.
I don't think he knows what he's trying to say, and we can't see it. We can't show it because this is a audio podcast. But this clip, I just want to preface this. This is Joe Biden reading off of notes. So I just want to preface this, that not only is he completely out of his league, but he had notes in front of him that he was allegedly reading off of. Let's go to the last clip that I sent in, and let's listen to this.
And in order to avoid those very high numbers, we have to do at least several things. One, we have to depend on what the president's going to do right now. And first of all, he has to wait till the cases before anything happens. Look, the whole idea is he's got to get in place things that were shortages of.
What?
All right, we're going to play it again because that is Joe Biden reading off of his notes. Now, he had a list of things that he wanted the president to do. Let's listen to that clip one more time.
And in order to avoid those very high numbers, we have to do at least several things. One, we have to depend on what the president's going to do right now. And first of all, he has to wait till the cases before anything happens. Look, the whole idea is he's got to get in place things that were shortages of.
I don't even, I can't even. Whoa.
That might be the worst one.
Oh.
That might be the worst one we've ever had. Let's listen one more time. Maybe we'll get it this time. One more time.
All right, I'm going to take notes.
And in order to avoid those very high numbers, we have to do at least several things. One, we have to depend on what the president's going to do right now. And first of all, he has to wait till the cases before anything happens. Look, the whole idea is he's got to get in place things that were shortages of.
He's got to get in place things that were shortages of. I don't know. I listened to that at least 5 or 10 times today. No clue what he's saying. And he's reading off of notes. He knows that he has a list of things he's supposed to read. He picks up the notes and he tries to read it off. And number one, he doesn't even get through number one, Joe. Number one is that we need to do what the president is going to do now.
Yeah. And here's the other part, though. People probably clap. Like, yeah, let's just do that. Let's do what he said he wanted to do, but what he had to do because the president was doing the doing. So whatever the president wants to do, we need to do that. And then whatever we're short, we need to have more short stuff.
I have no clue.
Josh, our producer, is looking at me going, I did not get that from you, Joe.
Mr. Producer, I just sent over a clip in the chat for Skype.
Is it a magazine or a clip?
No, it's a clip. Okay. It's a clip of today, Donald Trump, and I'll email it to you too, Josh. I just found this now. It's a clip of Donald Trump on Fox and Friends this morning, and I feel like we should play this because the takeaway from it is if Sleepy Joe Biden was president now, he wouldn't even know what's going on.
He doesn't know what's going on now.
He doesn't.
Have you seen the meme where he is? They say we should just put Joe Biden in an old folks home and tell him he won,
yeah.
just to make him feel better about himself. And he'd never know the difference.
Honestly, I'd be terrified if Joe Biden was in charge of this. I'd be actually terrified. They've stripped away all of the production value. He has no crowds to heckle him, right? He has no people behind him to distract him. It's him in his living room with a camera, and he even has notes in front of him. And that clip we played is what happens when Joe Biden's alone with a camera with some notes. Completely unintelligible. So I'd be terrified. And I think Trump's exactly right. If Sleepy Joe Biden was president now, he wouldn't even know what's going on. Josh, do we have that clip?
We're good to go.
All right, let's play it if you got it.
What a horrible statement to make.
Lindsey Graham was asked about it, and he said she's one to talk. This is not fair for her to say that. She was fiddling by delaying the stimulus package. But I want to ask you on that note about working with Democrats and Republicans. You're saying we've got this 3,000-bed hospital at the Javits Center that's opening up. The Navy ship Comfort is arriving today. You mentioned the 4 medical centers that are here in New York where the epicenter is. How much of this is the federal government, and how are you working with governors? What responsibility do they have? We interviewed Ron DeSantis earlier, and he said that he doesn't expect you to do his job for him.
Well, if you look, I mean, the ships are us. When you say me, I'm talking about the federal government, and the ships are us. And you have one in Los Angeles, too. And by the way, Gavin Newsom, the governor, has been very nice. And we've had our disputes on the forest fires and the borders and a lot of other things. But Gavin Newsom has been fantastic in his praise for what we've all done. No, the federal government has done far more than if anybody else was president. I mean, if Sleepy Joe was president, he wouldn't even know what's going on. You know that. I mean, everybody knows that. We have taken this thing and done a hell of a job. And like in Ohio yesterday, we got a sterilization.
If Sleepy Joe was president, he wouldn't even know what's going on. You know it. I know it. And when you listen to what Joe Biden's saying on TV, you're like, yeah, he has no idea what's going on.
He doesn't. And I'm not so sure that. Here's my fear. What if Joe Biden does get the nod for the nomination, which it looks like it's about to happen anyway, right? Paint dry.
Yeah.
The New York Post just reported that they should have Obama step in and negotiate Joe Biden exiting the primary ticket and putting someone else in his place. But I just look at it and go, this is a guy that I can pick. The president has to work 18, 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
You go to sleep, you wake up, and every single day you wake up to a new problem. I'm not sure that most people understand what that's like. Let me put it in perspective for you. When you run a company or several companies and you have multiple employees in different environments, you wake up in the morning. I'm going to tell you what my day looks like. I wake up in the morning at 4:30. I spend about an hour and a half reading, reflecting, writing notes, journaling. I do those things for about an hour and a half. In between that, I'm eating breakfast. I let my dogs out. At around 6 o'clock, I go through the normal routine of doing some workouts, make sure I stay healthy physically. And then I, go through make sure I brush my teeth, do all the normal stuff.
all the basic stuff.
So I start my day at 4:30 in the morning. I have to be ready to go by 7:30. Right? I have to be ready to go, walk out the door if I'm going to a meeting. I may have some tele meetings or some Zoom meetings or some sort of other meeting before I get to the office. I have to be in the office by no later than 8:30. At 8:30, I've got to get all my status reports either from the following Friday or from the following day. I've got to read all my status reports, and I got to be ready for conversations to happen at 9 a.m. I got to know what problems we have, what people are leaving, what people are coming in. I have to know what my schedule looks like. So
that pales in comparison to what the president has to do.
Pales in comparison, but and I'm getting tired talking about it. But I haven't even gotten to 9:30. So I get to 9:30. I have my first meeting by 9 o'clock. Usually my meeting starts at 8:30 in the office. I'm reviewing those notes. I'm having meetings with people in different departments and in different companies. I'm reviewing financials. I got to sign paperwork. I got to make sure that checks are approved. I got to go through just a long list of things that have to be done.
And at no point are you dealing with pandemics. You're not dealing with the nuclear football, right? And you're busy, but in the grand scheme of things, right? Millions of people's lives aren't in the balance every single time you make a decision, right?
No, mine is hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 people, right? But the families that I have to deal with. But you don't.
But here's the point: Joe Biden couldn't do your job.
No,
he couldn't do your job, and that has nothing to do with the nuclear football. It has nothing to do with pandemics, right? With North Korea. You look at all the things that are still going around in the background while all this is going on. Joe Biden couldn't manage one company, let alone multiple companies. He cannot be president. He cannot do it.
My point is that I don't get done at night till 7:30 at night. I go home, I download with my family. Sometimes I get out of here at 6 or 6:30, but more often than not, I'm working 70 hours a week. And then when I get home, I've got to field phone calls. I got to field emails. I go to bed, I do some more reading. I wake up in the morning and do the thing all over again. So that happens 5 days a week. Then I have the honey-do lists, the things that I do on weekends. And if you're in the middle of doing what we're doing now, which is, major transfers and acquisitions, which happen to coincide with what we're doing with the coronavirus. In other words, it slowed part of that down quite a bit. We look at President Trump, and he has to literally wake up in the morning.
Yeah, he says he sleeps 3 to 4 hours a day.
And that's probably an overstatement, right?
Yeah.
He's probably exaggerating how much time he gets to sleep, because he could be woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "Mr. President, we have this problem in Uganda. Mr. President, we have this problem in Russia. Mr. President, someone's flying." He has to constantly be on call. And by the way, it's a thankless job, because 50% of the population is going to think you don't work hard enough. And so if you go to golf, God forbid you go golf, right? You're an absolute just terrible person if you go golf, when all you have to do every day, all day, is look after 330 million people. No matter what decision you make,
in some cases even more. In some cases, he's making decisions about billions of people. But it's a lot. It really is a lot, and I wouldn't put Joe Biden in charge of a lemonade stand. I wouldn't let him control the money that's in my wallet right now. I wouldn't give him any power, because the guy goes on television and he talks like that. He says
my point is, he was a congressman.
He was
right?
yeah. I don't know if he was a
congressman. Can be
first.
both, right?
Yeah, but he was senator, and then he was vice president. Yeah.
But the point is that he's lived a life in the shadows. He's lived a life of making decisions collectively with other people that typically benefit him or other people like him in that environment. He's never had to be president. And even if you like Obama or don't like Obama, I personally think that he was one of the weakest presidents to ever have, in the history of the United States. But that's more because he didn't have any backbone, and he showed he actually weakened who we are as a nation. I think part of the issue that we have with coronavirus is not Obama's fault, but the mentality we have against it is Obama's fault.
Yeah. I mean, well, there are some reasons to say that you never want to say it was Obama's fault when that was.
I didn't say it was.
I know. I'm talking about the royal you, not just like you. And nobody would wants to say that. But some of the articles that have come out suggest that the stockpile of N95 masks were depleted during the swine flu and never replaced. We see that in New York, where New York was told back in 2015, Governor Cuomo was told, you need more ventilators. If there's a bad flu outbreak, people will die and you'll have to ration care. And the state of New York's response was that we don't have enough doctors to begin with, so it's pointless to have more ventilators because we don't have the doctors to run them. So there is an argument to be made that we are partially in this position because of Obama administration policies. Now, it was the Trump administration's obligation to look at those stockpiles and refill them as well. So that falls on the CDC under Trump too. But this isn't just Trump fiddling. We're going back to what Nancy Pelosi was saying. This isn't just Trump fiddled around and people died. It's a very complicated problem. And when you see Nancy Pelosi out there, what she did last week was disgusting. Delaying that bill so that they could try and load it up with pork, with Democrat pet projects.
Yeah, but that's what they're doing now. They just went ahead and said, hey, the next bill we're going to send through.
Yeah.
It's going to have all of these. Max, how about the Kennedy Center got $25 million and then proceeded right after they got $25 million in additional stimulus money to lay off all their musicians.
Hours after the bill was signed into law that they're going to get $25 million, they laid off their musicians. So what was the $25 million for?
Well, it wasn't to take care of their people, because no one in the government takes care of their people except for themselves.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. But yes, the next bill coming down the pike is going to be, the Democrats are promising that it's going to include things like ballot harvesting, where people are going to go door to door and pressure people to fill out the ballots in a particular way, and then you give that person your ballot and they turn it in for you. Right? And usually you have, in order to turn someone's ballot in, you need to be a caretaker or you need to be a family member. This ballot harvesting is when a stranger shows up at your door, says, here, fill out your ballot and give it to me. And then you trust them with handing it in. That's ripe for abuse, ripe for fraud, right? They're trying.
That's why they want it.
Yeah, of course, that's why they want it. Right. I mean, that's why you saw Republicans lose across California during the midterms. It wasn't just this anti-Trump backlash. It was ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting was legalized in California, and the leftist organizations paid big money to send people door to door, not just to canvass, but to actually tell people to fill out their ballot and then take it from them and turn it in. So, I mean, that's just one thing that the Democrats are trying to sneak into this fourth stimulus bill. All the things that they tried last week and failed. But it's at some point, and I'm hopeful because the American people are realizing this. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are public enemy number one for a lot of people. A lot of people realized they were laid off last week, and it probably didn't need to happen if their company had access to the loans that are going through right now, right? It was unnecessary, and you saw the Democrats delayed it to play political games. So at some point, we need to say that Nancy Pelosi can't be trusted with this power. She cannot be trusted to be Speaker of the House. She cannot be trusted to be second in line to the presidency, because at no point in this entire process has she, even for a minute, been willing to put country over party. And it's striking, it's obvious, and to think that she's just allowed to hold on to the reins after all of this, I don't understand it. we've been saying this on our social pages, but if Nancy Pelosi had tried these stunts at the time of the founding, she would have been tarred and feathered. That is a fact. But right now, with social distancing, no one can go do the tarring and feathering. And I mean that figuratively, not literally.
You do?
Just to preempt the fact checking and the angry people. I mean figurative tar and feathering. No one can go to her office and give them a piece of her mind. No one can protest. I mean, no one can like show up to her district office and protest in front of it. So it's a little bit disconcerting because you see people doing these horrible things and you don't see the backlash, but it is still fuming under the surface. People are very angry.
So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
We're running out of time, but let me ask you a question. If you knew your constitutional rights were being violated, right? They were stripping you of your constitutional rights. They were taking them away from you. And you knew that there was a 3%, 4% chance if they took away, if you did not protest, or that if you went to protest, 3-4% chance that you would die. You have a 4% chance that you would die if you protested, but they were taking away your constitutional rights. Would you still show up to protest?
Yeah.
Do you think most Americans, if you knew that you didn't have the right to congregate, you didn't have the right to freedom of speech, you didn't have the right to freedom of religion, do you believe that most people would want to protest against that, even if they knew that 2-3% chance you could die as a result of that?
Listen,
do you think most people would protest?
I think they would. In Florida, just today, they arrested a pastor for defying the government and holding services. In New York, it was either the mayor or the governor. I think it was the mayor. I think it was de Blasio. Said that
yes, it'll come in and take away your
that if you defy the government and you have church services or synagogue services or you open up your mosque for prayer, if you do that and you refuse to disband, the government will come in and permanently close your place of worship.
Yeah.
Right. This is
so
happening.
What is that?
This is happening.
But what I'm saying is that if we were able to put a definition behind it of what it really is, like forget all the propaganda, if we put a definition behind it, is not what they're doing right now a suspension of your constitutional rights?
Oh, it is. It absolutely
and they're
is.
saying that the price that you have to pay right now for suspension of your rights is that we're trying to stop you from 1% of you from dying. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, no,
we've created a slippery slope.
It's not a slippery slope. We're on the slide.
Well, we're on the slide, but it's still a slippery slope. We're talking about a justification of when and where the American people will be okay with having your rights suspended. And what I'm saying is that there's never a time that you can suspend my rights.
No, never. But here's the thing you're missing. One of the intervening variables in all of this, one of the reasons that people aren't out in force and fighting, is that on unemployment, many people will make more through unemployment for the next couple months than they would working their job.
So they silence people. They replace your rights with money.
Why would you, like my wife was laid off last week, and she technically can qualify for Colorado unemployment because the way they do the dates, she had an entire quarter of the last year, qualifying year, where she worked in Colorado. Technically, the entire time she had a Colorado license, so I think she'd qualify no matter what. But anyway, Colorado now has 39 weeks of unemployment, 39 weeks of between $500 and $600 a month. How?
$500 to $600 a week.
Oh, a week. Sorry, $500 to $600 a week. Why would anyone go out and protest the government when they're getting checks in their mail? Right? I mean, that's part of the reason that this stimulus goes through. Yes, it's to stimulate the economy. It's also to stop people from getting desperate. It's to stop people from looting, from protesting, right? From marching on the Capitol.
But looting and protesting is actually happening right now still.
Oh, it still is. It still is.
Yeah.
And there will be a lot of people who use their stimulus money on some kind of consumer electronic that I think if they do that, they should lose access to any government welfare ever. Right? If we're in 20 to 30% unemployment and someone's buying a television with their stimulus money, they should be cut off. But that's a whole separate segment. But yeah, it's not just to stimulate the economy. It's also to pacify the people. And if you lost your job, if you lost your income, if your house was being foreclosed, right? If they were repoing your car, you'd be angry and you'd be looking to blame someone and you'd be marching on Washington. But part of the benefit by suspending foreclosures, suspending car repossessions, right? Giving them unemployment is you pacify them long enough to try and fix the crisis. So, yes, I'd be out there. I'd be out there, but a lot of people are looking at it through that lens and saying, why should I go risk my life when the government's sending me checks? And it's a really cynical way of looking at, right? The founders are rolling over in their grave saying this.
I don't know if anyone else, and again, it comes down to living or existing. Do you want to exist or do you want to live?
Yeah.
And living requires a certain amount of risk. It just does.
It does, yeah.
But if you want to exist, are you just here to die? And I think this comes back to just the idea that as a society, we have forgotten what it means to truly live. Like, what does it mean to truly live? I want to live. I want to experience life. I don't want to sit in my house and wait to die.
Yeah.
And whatever you want to say about this, we literally are letting the boogeyman scare us. A what if, or well, that could have happened. What could have happened? What happens, and what doesn't happen, doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I constantly say that if we chase the bubble wrap mentality, we are never going to be able to accomplish anything in our lives. And I feel like this virus is paralyzing our society. It's causing us to look back and say, we just have to wait. We just have to wait this out. We have to wait it out. We have to wait it out. Well, what comes after this? There will be another virus.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there will. And we're going to have to learn the lessons from this, right? We're going to have to learn these lessons and make sure that constitutional rights are never violated again. There's going to be there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. Again. I know there's a lot of work.
I'm more worried about living.
Yeah.
And right now we're teaching our kids to live through video games.
Yeah, I know. It's
not live life.
Well, listen,
get on your bicycle and set up the trash cans and jump those trash cans on a bike. We just don't see it. They're like, oh, you could get hurt, you could break a leg. So what if you break a leg?
Well, I mean, right now is the last time you want to break a leg because you don't want to go into the hospitals, right? I understand right at this very moment not wanting to break a leg, but I agree with you that we as a society have become too coddled. We've become too risk averse. And obviously you don't want your kid out there doing something dangerous. The things that you did as a child, the things that I did as a kid, I think about the things that I got away with, the things I survived, and I think to myself, wow, I should have died. I should have died half a dozen times, no doubt. I'm sure you have a ton of them. I know, but people do, and
people do. That's that whole mentality that we're going to be able to stop ourselves from dying. We can't outrun our mortality. We can't. There's nothing in us that can stop that from happening. And frankly, if I would have died in any one of those number of things that I probably shouldn't have done, I jumped to, when I was 14 years old, I was TPing a house. I'm going to tell this story. We're going to stay on it for a minute, right? I was TPing a house, and we were having a good time as young kids, just up to no good. And we must have by the way, back then, people would have peeled the toilet paper off those trees and used it. And kept it.
Today, they do the same thing. If you TP someone's house today, they go on Craigslist and sell it.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, and probably get good money for it. Yeah. So we're TPing this house, and there's probably 10 of us, and we're just being boys, right? I think there was probably a girl or two in there. We were just figuring it out at 14. And so in the kids' house that we toilet papered, for those of you who don't know, we TP. T means toilet paper in someone's house. Came out the door and started screaming. Well, I was a really good athlete as a kid, and I could jump through the ceiling. And so I am tearing down the road, and he just decided he was going to chase me. And I'm like, hey, this guy's never going to catch me. So I run through this backyard, and I see this row of bushes. And so I could literally jump out the ceiling. So I jumped over these bushes. And there was a 12-foot drop on the other side. It was a straight down wall. And when I got over that, all I remember saying to myself is, I'm going to die.
Yeah, this is it.
Like this is not going to end well. So I ended up breaking my ankle and then scurrying up against the wall. I landed, rolled out of it, but my ankle did break. And sat up against the wall. And all I remember this guy's dad doing is walking over the bushes, and he just went, holy, you just imagine what his next word. Where did that kid go? Right? And it became this story that this kid went to school with. Now I had a broken ankle, so I was in a cast. Everybody asked me what happened, and I was like, I was just messing around with my buddies, but it went around school like wildfire that my dad saw someone jump supernaturally over these bushes and down a 12-foot drop on a retaining wall on the other side, and was like ran away. Yeah. As if I had I didn't run away at all. I broke my ankle, scurried up against the wall, covered my mouth because I was screaming in pain, hobbled myself home. Right. But you could have died from something like that.
Yeah, you could have.
I have dozens of stories like that I pushed the limit.
We all have a ton of stories like that. And
why are we taking that away from the next generation? Right. And I'll tell you, we're going to get to the point where nobody wants to storm the shores of Normandy. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to, is that we're building a society today that will not have enough courage to be willing to die for something they believe in, be willing to die for something that is living. Yeah. Instead, we're being taught to exist. Well, and the only thing that
keep going.
The only thing that you get in a place where you just exist is what they're willing to give you. That's a socialist environment. That's a communist environment, and that's just not what we're about as a country. And actually, I don't want to be a part of a country that would even entertain that.
Well, I think we can end it on this, and this is kind of talks about what you mentioned last week. I think it was Texas's lieutenant governor. He's in his 70s, and he came out and he said, we all need to get back to work. And if we die, we die. But some people are going to have to sacrifice to get this economy back together. So you're going to have to see that, whether it's this week, next month, you're going to have to see it, because we're not going to get back to where we need to go without some sacrifice. So that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember, you can download this and subscribe to it on the Apple Store and on Google Play. And you can also find it on our website, conservative-daily.com. And so my name is Max McGuire.
And I'm Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over, but the only way we can win is if we all fight together.